By the shores of a vast and endless sea, there lay a small fishing village struggling to survive. Once a place of abundance, the sea had now turned against them. For months, the fishermen returned with empty nets, their boats rocking on the waves, carrying nothing but disappointment. Hunger and despair spread through the village like an unrelenting tide. That afternoon, as the scorching sun blazed overhead, the air grew thick with hopelessness. Men sat by their boats, mending their torn nets, while women whispered prayers over dwindling food supplies. The village elder, a man whose weathered face carried the burden of generations, gathered the people at the shore. His voice was heavy with sorrow as he spoke. "We have tried everything, cast our nets near and far, prayed for favor, yet the sea remains silent. If this continues, we will not survive." The villagers stood in silence, their hearts sinking like stones in deep water. Then the elder lifted his eyes toward the heavens and said, "We must turn to the one who commands the seas. Let us call upon God, for only He can bring the miracle we need." As the last rays of sunlight danced upon the waves, the villagers knelt upon the warm sand. Hands clasped, voices trembling, they cried out in unison, "Lord, hear our cries. We are lost without you. Please have mercy on us. Bring us fish for our nets and hope for our hearts. Save our village, O Lord." Their prayers carried across the waters, reaching beyond the horizon. Little did they know the answer to their plea was already on its way. The next morning, as the golden sun rose over the waves, the villagers stirred from their restless sleep. The salty breeze carried with it an unfamiliar presence. A lone figure walked along the shoreline, his steps steady, his eyes reflecting the vastness of the ocean. He was an old man, dressed in simple, tattered clothes. His weathered hands clutched a fishing net, one so old and worn that it seemed unlikely to hold even a single fish. Curious murmurs spread through the village as the stranger approached. "Who is he?" one whispered. "A beggar, a lost traveler," another questioned. The old man met their gazes with a gentle nod and spoke in a voice as calm as the morning tide. "I have heard of your struggles. If you allow me, I will fish alongside you today." The villagers exchanged wary glances. The man had no boat of his own, no fine nets, no wealth. What could he possibly do? Lucas, a young fisherman with nothing left to lose, stepped forward. He was lean, his skin deeply tanned from years spent under the unrelenting sun. His small wooden boat, battered by time and weather, was barely afloat, its faded blue paint peeling away in strips. Yet despite his struggles, his heart still held a sliver of hope. "You can join me," Lucas offered hesitantly. "But I warn you, the sea has given us nothing for months." Before the old man could respond, a booming laugh echoed from the docks. "Are you serious, Lucas?" The voice belonged to Hector, the wealthiest fisherman in the village. He stood tall and broad-shouldered, his posture exuding arrogance. He wore a fine linen tunic, its embroidered edges gleaming in the morning sun. A thick leather belt cinched his waist, adorned with a golden buckle shaped like a fish. His grand boat, a magnificent vessel with sails embroidered in gold, was the pride of the village. Hector sneered. "If this old fool believes he can catch fish, let him prove it. I challenge you." He turned to the stranger, a smirk on his lips. "We will both set sail now, and when the sun begins to set, we shall see who returns with more fish." The villagers gasped at Hector's boldness, but the stranger man simply nodded. "Very well," he said. "Let the sea decide." The boats drifted into deeper waters. The morning sun shimmered on the waves, and a cool breeze carried the scent of salt and adventure. Hector stood tall on the deck of his magnificent boat, the salty breeze ruffling his dark hair. The sky was clear, the waves steady. Everything seemed perfect for a grand catch. "Cast the nets," he commanded, his voice brimming with authority. His men, trained and disciplined, obeyed instantly. The golden nets gleamed as they sank beneath the water's surface, spreading wide like a royal tapestry woven for the sea itself. Hector crossed his arms, watching expectantly. Any moment now, his nets would be filled. He could already imagine the villagers' admiration when he returned with the largest haul. But then, nothing. Hector's brow furrowed. Again? His crew threw the nets once more. They waited, muscles tense, hands gripping the ropes. When they pulled them up, empty. Sweat beaded on Hector's forehead. He clenched his jaw. Impossible. The sea has never failed me before. Again and again, the nets came up with nothing but seawater and weeds. Frustration turned to rage. His pride refused to accept defeat. "Cast them again," he roared, fists tightening. The men hesitated but obeyed, yet the ocean remained silent. The wealthiest, most powerful fisherman in the village stood on his grand boat with nothing to show. Far away in a worn-out little boat, Lucas sighed. His arms ached from months of labor with no reward. His net, frayed and patched countless times, hung limply in his hands. Beside him, the old man, Jesus in disguise, sat quietly, watching the waves as if listening to a secret only he could hear. Lucas shook his head. "If even Hector can't catch fish, what chance do I have?" Then the old man spoke, his voice calm yet commanding. "Cast your net on the right side." Lucas frowned. "I've tried everything. There are no fish left." Jesus' eyes, deep and knowing, met his. "Do you trust me?" Something stirred in Lucas's chest. There was something different about this old man, something divine. Swallowing hard, he tightened his grip on the net. "All right, but I don't expect much." He cast the net over the right side of the boat. The moment it touched the water, a force like none he had ever felt nearly yanked him overboard. "What the?" Lucas gasped, gripping the rope with all his strength. The sea beneath them exploded with movement. Huge fish, bigger than any he had ever seen, filled the net instantly, their silver scales gleaming like molten treasure. The sheer weight threatened to tip the boat. "Help me!" Lucas cried, his muscles burning as he struggled to hold on. Jesus smiled, placing a hand on the net. Miraculously, though the net overflowed, the weight became manageable, just enough for them to pull in without capsizing. Lucas panted, heart hammering. This is impossible." The old man's gaze held something beyond the ocean, beyond time itself. Lucas shivered. This was no ordinary fisherman. Who was he? As the sun dipped toward the horizon, both boats returned to shore. The villagers rushed to the docks, their eyes wide with astonishment. Lucas's boat was overflowing with fish, glistening silver and gold in the fading sunlight. The people cheered, their hunger and despair vanishing in an instant. But Hector stood among them with empty hands, his magnificent boat, his expensive nets. None of it had yielded even a single fish. His face paled. He turned to the old man, anger and desperation burning in his eyes. "You tricked me," Hector bellowed. You did something unnatural." The old man stepped onto the shore, the crowd falling silent around him. Slowly he raised his hands, scarred hands, bearing marks that the villagers had only heard of in sacred stories. A whisper spread through the crowd. "He's not just a fisherman." Lucas's heart pounded as realization dawned. "This is Jesus." The villagers dropped to their knees, their eyes filling with awe. Jesus looked at Hector, his voice soft yet firm. "You relied on your own power, your own riches. But the sea listens not to wealth, nor do miracles bow to pride. Hector fell to his knees, his arrogance shattered. "Forgive me," he whispered, his voice breaking. I thought I could control everything." Jesus smiled gently. "True wealth is found in faith, not in gold." And with those words he turned toward the setting sun. As light embraced him, he vanished, leaving only the sound of the waves behind. The villagers never forgot what had happened that day. Lucas shared his catch with the entire village, and no one went hungry. The once forgotten fishing village flourished again, not just with food, but with faith. And Hector, he was never the same. His golden boat no longer mattered, for he had learned the greatest lesson of all: trust in the one who commands the seas, and you will never be without.